Greetings, I'm the one called Harsho and welcome to VG Therapy, the channel where I talk about games. Touhou for me represents my early foray into the internet, as I remember seeing a plethora of memes and fan art and music all based around Touhou before I even knew what Touhou was. I did eventually get into the series back in 2010, and since then I've only ever managed to beat number 7, which was Perfect Cherry Blossom. However, that's not the game I'm going to be talking about today. No, the one I'm going to be talking about is the very first one, Touhou Highly Responsive to Prayers. And that's because of two reasons. First being, why the hell not? No one really talks about these older games. The ones that came out for the PC-98, they only talk about the ones that came out on Windows, which started at Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, which was the 6th game. But these first 5 are never really talked about, so that's why I want to talk about them. Mainly the first one, because there was a thing about this first game that I found to be very interesting that I'll get into a bit later.
Touhou Project, or Project Shrine Maiden as it's known for one reason or another, is a series created by Team Shanghai Alice, which consists of Junior Ota, a man who is often called Kanuishi and is mostly known as Zun, to which is the name I'm going to be using from now on. He has worked on a handful of games for Taito, but he is largely known for his work on Touhou.
And that's the entire staff list. Team Shanghai Alice consists of Zun and Zun alone, which, hey, mad props to him for doing as much as he's done.
From when he was Zunsoft to now, the Touhou Mainline series consists of 26 games, of which 10 are numbered strangely, i.e. 12.5 and 12.8, 16 main games, 6 games that were done in collaboration with Twilight Frontier as they were all fighting games, 5 games that don't carry the Team Shanghai Alice name, and outside of those games there are 10 fan-made games that are on home consoles, 4 of which have physical versions, and one of those being Urban Legend and Limbo actually being a mainline Touhou game, as it is one of the fighting games made by Team Shanghai Alice and Twilight Frontier.
And that's quite the accomplishment, don't you think? I mean, outside of the Twilight Frontier games, which means that there's about 20 games that Zun made by himself as a one-man team. And as stated by there being fan games on home consoles, this series has quite the following. And as I stated before, I remember seeing so many different fan works. And like, a lot of them are very high quality. Like, I remember seeing I think it's 10 episode anime series made by fans that is a lot more high quality than it should be. And even just looking at some of the other stuff, I remember listening to Sono's Perfect Math class for hours on end, not knowing what it was about because, as I said, at that point in time, I didn't know what Touhou was. But the thing is, getting away from the main topic at hand, which is the first game.
Being made in 1995, but not being displayed until November of 1996 at the 20th Hatoyama Matsuri, a small festival in a Tokyo university, and off for sale into Comiket 52 on the 15th of August 1997 alongside the sequel, The Story of Eastern Wonderland. The first 5 games of the series stand apart from the later games in the series due to coming out on the NEC PC-98, having a few noticeable design changes and also largely being non-canon with characters that don't appear later in the series.
The games also didn't sell too well, and the fandom didn't really kick off until the Windows era. As I was looking to get a physical copy of this game, or any of the earlier ones, for the sake of a collection. Because I went, oh, what did these games actually come bundled with? And also, it's the first Touhou games, that'd be good in the collection, right? However, I couldn't find nothing online. And I could find a little bit about some sales statistics for a couple of the games, and they tell me that the sales were in the 100 to 300 range at best. So yeah, not too many people bought them, which kind of makes sense because they were sold at a convention and they didn't have a brand name attached to them. And they also came out for the PC-98, which came out in 1987 and got discontinued in 2003. And my admittedly limited knowledge of PCs tell me that people probably weren't investing a lot in the PC-98 at that point in time. But I could be wrong. I don't know. This is just me guessing. And with that history lesson out of the way, if you remember, I said there was a second thing that interested me about the game.
While all the games are vertically scrolling shoot-em-ups, Danmaku/bullet hell if you want to be precise, they each have their own little things that they do by themselves, but they are all of the same genre. and as I said, they fall under the subgenre of Danmaku or bullet hell, which means that there are a ton of bullets on screen at any given time, and you spend a lot of time navigating that maze of bullets before you.
Touhou was also the first shoot 'em up that I played, so that probably says a lot about the types of shoot 'em ups that I like.
But the strange thing is that the first Touhou games plays a lot more like Breakout or Arkanoid, with you bouncing a yin-yang orb and trying to hit tiles with it. This kind of confused me because of where the series goes and how little there was that I could connect with the later games.
Let me tell you what this game does before I start telling you about what the later games also do.
The game, as I said, is like Arkanoid, with you running along the bottom of the screen, and you can throw food or upwards to affect how the orb moves. You also have the ability to swing a Gohei around to hit the orb, and depending on which swing hits it, changes how it flies off. You can also slide kick, moving flip kick, and standing flip kick. These moves are the only way to interact with the orb, because if it touches you normally, it kills you.
I'm not sure why punching the yin-yang orb doesn't hurt, yet getting hit in the face does. Oh wait.
You use these abilities to try and make the orb hit all of the tiles and get to the next level with combo points from hitting multiple tiles before the orb hits the floor. Periodically, as in randomly, items fall out of the tiles. These consist of a point ball, which gives you extra points if you catch it, and the amount of points you get goes up for every ball you get without missing one. And there is an item which gives you an extra bomb. What it does is hit every tile on the screen when activated by pressing both the shoot and swing buttons twice.
It took me a few minutes before I figured out how to do that. And even once I did, I never really used the bombs for the tiles, I mainly saved them for the bosses. And now, as someone who only ever played Arkanoid and Breakout on maybe an old crappy phone or something, the presence of bosses was quite surprising to me.
And here I can kind of see the bullet hell roots, with the bosses having patterns that involve shooting a lot of bullets, with me focusing more on dodging than hitting them. There are 4 bosses that you have to fight, however after the first you are given the choice of going through the Makai route or the Hell route, which brings the total amount of bosses to 6, and on top of that 4 separate endings, which is just a good or bad ending for both the Hell and the Makai route. To get the good ending, you have to never use a continue, and to get the bad ending, use at least one.
This brings me to a point of continues. Unlike later games, you get infinite continues here. So that means I can actually beat this game, so that's a plus. But at the same time, I was struggling to get the good ending, so I just called it quits on that.
Because I spent a long time trying to get through and do it perfect, but I just couldn't. And this led me to learning 2 things. First is that the difficulty doesn't change as much as I had hoped between the 4 difficulties. I was playing on normal, and because I kept dying on the bosses, I swallowed my pride and dropped it to easy, and I was greeted by almost nothing changing. The only thing that changed was that on the main levels, the things that would shoot at you don't anymore, and with the bosses, I couldn't really notice a difference. And so that, to me, meant nothing, because the things that shoot at you in the main levels weren't that difficult to deal with, and weren't my main cause of death. It was the bosses, and so me lowering it didn't do anything. Curious, I raised the difficulty and saw that on hard mode, the bosses get a bit faster, but still nothing special. And on Lunatic, when the tiles are hit on the main levels, they also shoot at you, which I do have to say is kinda cool. But here's the second thing. I wasn't finding the game all that hard. It was just easy to slip up, or easy to find yourself in a situation where there isn't really anything you could do to avoid getting hit, so you die. Like when I finally decided to roll through the game to see what I actually got my continue use down to on hard mode, it was 8 for Makai and 4 for Hell, with most of those being for the bosses.
With my brief explanation as to what the later games do and my explanation of what this game does, you might be thinking, well at least I was, what does this game do that's actually similar to the later games? What carries over?
Well, the shooting does, I guess. It's a bit different though, because you have to keep hitting the shoot button rather than just hold it. Also, bombs carry over, but they're a bit different. In this one, you get a bomb every time you die, which is not the case in later games. Also, since in later games there is no melee option, the melee button is the bomb button, which is why it took me a few minutes to try and figure out how you were supposed to use them. Also, I found out even later that unlike the later games, bombs only do damage to the bosses when you're on your last life for some odd reason. And really, that's all the gameplay that carries over. Like, yeah, there's a lot of bullets flying around at you during the bosses, but how you navigate through them and deal with them is different. Like in this one, your shots in the first swing of your Gohei can deflect them, which doesn't happen in the later games. And later games, you have a lot more room to move around in, so it's easier to dodge. There are things that do carry over outside the gameplay, like the main character of Reimu Hakurei, who looks kinda different, and the main thing that is carried over is the good music, with the song Eternal Shrine Maiden being said by Zun to be one of the most important songs of the 5 games, and still important to him personally. The whole soundtrack is great, and that is one of the things that stays consistent across the series. As someone who isn't much of a muser, I don't feel qualified to tell you what makes music great, but you should know that it is just from hearing it in the background of this review, and also considering how many remixes there are, it tells you that a lot of people like it and the series by extension.
And since I feel that I made it clear how much I enjoyed the rest of the series, the question is, do I like this game? What do I think about this game? Because as someone who knows what the rest of the series is like, it's very strange. It's like a child that takes after one parent more than the other, where if you are told and you look hard enough, you can kinda see the resemblance, but not really. But at the same time, that doesn't really mean it's bad. And in fact, I actually loved this game. I had so much fun with it. I sunk many hours into it, and I really wouldn't mind going back after this review to play it again. And so, as a result of that, I give this game a 4 out of 4. It's just pure arcade fun. And with that, I've been Horror Show, and this was VG Therapy.